in which our happy couples learn that life is not easy, whether as newlyweds or as recent divorcees. Part 5, Chapter 1. Princess Sherbatsky thought that to have the wedding before Lent, which was only 5 weeks away, was impossible, because half the trousseau would not be ready by then. But she could not help agreeing with Levin that after Lent would be too late, since Prince Sherbatsky's old aunt was very ill and might die soon, and the mourning would delay the wedding still longer. And therefore, deciding to divide the trousseau into 2 parts, a larger and a smaller, the princess agreed to have the wedding before Lent. She decided to prepare the smaller part of the trousseau at once, and send the larger part later, and she was very angry with Levin for being quite unable to tell her seriously whether he agreed to it or not. This disposition was the more convenient, as immediately after the wedding the young people were going to the country, where the things in the larger trousseau would not be needed. Levin continued in the same state of madness, in which it seemed to him that he and his happiness constituted the chief and only goal of all that existed, and that there was no longer any need for him to think or worry about anything, that everything was being and would be done for him by others. He even had no plans or goals for his future life. He left it for others to decide, knowing that it would all be wonderful. His brother Sergei Ivanovitch, Stepan Arkadyevitch, and the princess directed him in what he had to do. He was simply in complete agreement with everything suggested to him. His brother borrowed money for him. The princess advised leaving Moscow after the wedding. Stepan Arkadyevitch advised going abroad. He agreed to everything. "Do as you like if it amuses you. I'm happy, and my happiness can be no greater or smaller, whatever you do," he thought. When he told Kitty of Stepan Arkadyevitch's advice about going abroad, he was very surprised that she did not agree to it, but had certain requirements of her own regarding their future life. She knew that Levin had work in the country that he loved. He could see that she not only did not understand this work, but had no wish to understand it. That did not prevent her, however, from considering this work very important, and therefore she knew that their home would be in the country, and wanted to go not abroad, where she was not going to live, but where their home would be. This definitely expressed intention surprised Levin, but since it was all the same to him, he at once asked Stepan Arkadyevitch, as if it were his duty, to go to the country and arrange everything there, as he knew how to do, with that taste of which he had so much. "Listen, though," Stepan Arkadyevitch asked Levin one day, after he came back from the country where he had arranged everything for the young people's arrival. "Do you have a certificate that you've been to confession?" "No. Why?" "You can't go to the altar without it." Aye, Levin cried. "I bet it's a good 9 years since I last prepared for communion. I never thought of it." "You're a fine one," Stepan Arkadyevitch said, laughing. "And you call me a nihilist. This won't do, however. You've got to confess and take communion." "But when? There are only 4 days left." Stepan Arkadyevitch arranged for that as well, and Levin began to prepare for communion. For Levin, as an unbeliever who at the same time respected the beliefs of others, it was very difficult to attend and participate in any church rituals. Now, in the softened mood he found himself in, sensitive to everything, This necessity to pretend was not only difficult for him, but seemed utterly impossible. Now, in this state of his glory, his blossoming, he had either to lie or to blaspheme. He felt himself unable to do either the one or the other. But much as he questioned Stepan Arkadyevich whether it might not be possible to get the certificate without going to confession, Stepan Arkadyevich declared that it was impossible. "And what is it, Hugh? 2 days? And he's such a sweet, intelligent old fellow, he'll pull this tooth of yours before you notice it." Standing through the first liturgy, Levin tried to refresh in himself his youthful memories of the strong religious feeling he had experienced between the ages of 16 and 17. But he could see at once that it was utterly impossible for him. He tried to look at it as a meaningless, empty custom, like the custom of paying visits, but he felt that he could not do that either. With regard to religion, Levin, like most of his contemporaries, was in a very uncertain position. He could not believe, yet at the same time he was not firmly convinced that it was all incorrect. And therefore, being unable either to believe in the meaningfulness of what he was doing, to look at it indifferently as at an empty formality, he experienced all through the time of preparation a feeling of awkwardness and shame at doing what he himself did not understand, and therefore, as his inner voice kept telling him, something false and bad. During the services, he first listened to the prayers, trying to ascribe a meaning to them that did not disagree with his views. Then, feeling that he could not understand and had to condemn them, he tried not to listen, but occupied himself with his own thoughts, observations, and memories, which, during this idle standing in church, wandered with extreme vividness through his head. He stood through the liturgy, vigil and compline, and the next day, getting up earlier than usual without having tea, went to the church at 8 o'clock in the morning to hear the morning prayers and confess. There was no one in the church except a begging soldier, 2 little old women, and the clergy. A young deacon, the 2 halves of his long back sharply outlined under his thin cassock, met him and, going over to a little table, began at once to read the prayers. As the reading went on, and especially at the frequent and rapid repetition of the same words, "Lord have mercy," which sounded like "Lord the mercy, Lord a mercy," Levin felt that his mind was locked and sealed and should not be touched or stirred now, otherwise confusion would come of it, and therefore, standing behind the deacon, without listening or fathoming, he went on having his own thoughts. Amazing how much expression there is in her hand, he thought, recalling how they had sat at the corner table the day before. They found nothing to talk about, as almost always during that time, and she, placing her hand on the table, kept opening and closing it, and laughed as she watched its movement. He recalled kissing that hand, and afterwards studying the merging lines on its pink palm. Again, Lord of mercy, thought Levin, crossing himself, bowing and looking at the supple movement of the bowing deacon's back. Then she took my hand and studied the lines. "You have a nice hand," she said. And he looked at his own hand and at the deacon's stubby hand. "Yes, it will soon be over now," he thought. "No, it seems he's starting again," he thought, listening to the prayers. "No, it is the end. There, he's bowing to the ground. That's always just before the end." The hand in its velveteen cuff having discreetly received a 3-ruble note, the deacon said he would register it, and, briskly stamping with his new boots over the flagstones of the empty church, went into the sanctuary. A moment later he peeked out and beckoned to Levin. The thought locked up until then, and Levin's hand began to stir, but he hastened to drive it away. "It'll work out somehow," he reflected, and walked to the anvil. He went up the steps and, turning to the right, saw the priest, an elderly man with a thin, graying beard and tired, kindly eyes. He was standing by a lectern, leafing through the service book. After bowing slightly to Levin, He at once began reading prayers in an accustomed voice. When he finished them, he bowed to the ground and turned to face Levine. "Christ stands here invisibly and receives your confession," he said, pointing to the crucifix. "Do you believe everything that is taught by the Holy Apostolic Church?" The priest went on, turning his eyes from Levine's face and folding his hands under the stole. "I have doubted. I doubt everything," Levine said in a voice he himself found unpleasant, and fell silent. The priest waited a few seconds to see whether he would say anything more, and then, closing his eyes in a quick, provincial patter with a stress on the O's, said, "Doubts are in the nature of human weakness, but we must pray that God in His mercy will strengthen us. What particular sins do you have?" he added without the slightest pause, as if trying not to waste time. "My chief sin is doubt. I doubt everything, and for the most part live in doubt." "Doubt is in the nature of human weakness," the priest repeated the same words. "What is it that you doubt predominantly?" "I doubt everything. I sometimes even doubt the existence of God," Levine said involuntarily, and was horrified at the impropriety of what he had said. But Levine's words did not seem to make any impression on the priest. "What doubts can there be of the existence of God?" he hastened to say with a barely perceptible smile. Levine was silent. "What doubt can you have of the existence of the Creator when you behold His creations?" the priest went on in a quick, habitual manner. "Who adorned the heavenly firmament with lights? Who clothed the earth in its beauty? How can it be without a Creator?" he said, glancing questioningly at Levine. Levine felt that it would be improper to enter into a philosophical debate with the priest, and therefore he said in answer only what had a direct bearing on the question. "I don't know," he said. "You don't know? How then can you doubt that God created everything?" the priest said in merry perplexity. "I don't understand anything," Levine said, blushing and feeling that his words were stupid, and could not help being stupid in such a situation. "Pray to God and ask Him. Even the Holy Fathers had doubts, and asked God to confirm their faith. The devil has great power, and we mustn't give in to him. Pray to God, ask Him, pray to God," he repeated hurriedly. The priest was silent for a time, as if pondering. "You are, as I have heard, about to enter into matrimony with the daughter of my parishioner and spiritual son, Prince Sherbatsky," he added with a smile. "A wonderful girl." "Yes," Levine answered, blushing for the priest. "Why does he need to ask about a confession?" he thought. And the priest, as if answering his thought, said to him, "You are about to enter into matrimony, and it may be that God will reward you with offspring. Is it not so? Well, then, what sort of upbringing can you give your little ones if you don't overcome in yourself the temptation of the devil who is drawing you into unbelief?" he said in mild reproach. "If you love your child, then, being a good father, you will not desire only wealth, luxury, and honor for him. You will desire his salvation, his spiritual enlightenment with the light of truth. Is it not so? What answer will you give when an innocent child asks you, 'Papa, who created everything that delights me in this world? The earth, the waters, the sun, the flowers, the grass?' Will you really say to him, 'I don't know'? You cannot not know, since the Lord God in His great mercy has revealed it to you. Or else your little one will ask you, 'What awaits me in the life beyond the grave?' What will you tell him if you don't know anything? How will you answer him? Will you leave him to the temptation of the world and the devil? That's not good," he said, and stopped, inclining his head to one side and looking at Levine with meek, kindly eyes. Levine made no reply, now not because he did not want to get into an argument with the priest, but because no one had ever asked him such questions, and before his little ones asked him such questions there was still time to think how to answer. "You are entering upon a time of life," the priest went on, when one must choose a path and keep to it. Pray to God that in his goodness he may help you and have mercy on you, he concluded. May our Lord and God Jesus Christ, through the grace and bounties of his love for mankind, forgive you, child. And having finished the prayer of absolution, the priest blessed and dismissed him. On returning home that day, Levine experienced the joyful feeling of having ended his awkward situation, and ended it in such a way that he had not needed to lie. Apart from that, he was left with a vague recollection that what this kindly and nice old man had said was not at all as stupid as it had seemed to him at first, and that there was something in it that needed to be grasped. Not now, of course, Levine thought, but some time later on. Levine felt more than ever that there was something unclear and impure in his soul, and that with regard to religion he was in the same position that he so clearly saw and disliked in others, and for which he reproached his friend Ziyashki. Levine was especially happy that evening, which he spent with his fiancée at Dolly's, and explaining his excited state to Stepan Arkadyevich, said he was as happy as a dog that has been taught to jump through a hoop, and, having finally understood and done what was demanded of it, squeals, wags its tail, and leaps in rapture onto the tables and windowsills. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.